All right, today we're jumping into a pretty powerful sermon by Maulana Syed John Elisha Kazmi that's really been making waves. In it, he talks about everything from global conflicts to what he calls a cultural war on Islam, and he lays out this really radical vision for the future. So let's get right into it.
So he kicks things off with this really potent line. The idea here is that for him, the current conflict, it's more than just a tragedy. He sees it as this huge moment of clarity, a moment that's kind of forcing everyone to open their eyes and see the world for what it really is. It's about revealing who really stands for what and who's actually willing to do something about it.
So, what exactly is this clarity he's talking about? Well, in his view, the conflict in Gaza is basically like a global litmus test. It's what separates the people who just talk about justice from those who are actually out there, fighting for it. And this is where he gets really specific. He points to groups like Lebanese Hezbollah, the Yemenis, Iran, and Iraq, and says these are the only ones, who are actively stepping in to help the oppressed in Gaza. And then he makes a really critical point, at least for his argument. He identifies every single one of these groups as Shia. And this leads him to question the inaction of, as he puts it, a billion other Muslims.
Okay, so let's shift gears to the next major theme. Because, according to the Maulana, this conflict isn't just being fought on the battlefield with weapons. He says there's another, maybe even more intense war being waged on a totally different front, and that's the battle for culture.
And this is a really important distinction he makes. He's not just saying, oh, our values are different. No, he frames Western culture as a literal weapon. A weapon that he believes is designed with one purpose: to destroy the very foundations of Islamic society. Things like shame, honor, and the family unit. And in his view, the end result of that is what he calls a society of savagery and hedonism. And to back this up, he gives a really specific example. He talks about a UN education bill that, in his words, promoted dirty teachings of sex and same-sex marriage in schools. Now, according to him, this bill was pushed on the whole world, and he claims that the only nation that stood up and rejected it was Iran. He says that other Islamic nations, they just accepted it, but did so quietly, behind the scenes. To really drive home the personal cost of this, he tells a story. It's about a very successful Pakistani scientist living in London. This guy had it all, materially speaking, but he ended up totally alone. The speaker says his wife divorced him for his pension, his 4 daughters left and married non-believers, and the man was left feeling like his life was, and this is a direct quote, worse than a dog's. It's presented as this powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of chasing that Western dream. So that story kind of transitions us from this big external cultural war to a much more internal personal one. The sermon argues that the most dangerous weapon being used isn't some UN policy or a movie. It's a spiritual sickness, and that sickness is materialism. He actually gives this spiritual disease a name, hub al-dunya, which is Arabic for the love of the world. And he doesn't mince words. He calls this the absolute root of all sin. The idea is that it's this deep attachment to worldly things, to status and possessions, that it literally creates a barrier. It blocks a person's heart, making it impossible, in his view, for the love of God to get in. And he breaks this love of the world down even further into 6 specific things that he says can lead you astray. So on top of just that general love of worldly things, he calls out the love of leadership, the love of food, the love of sleep, the love of comfort, and the love of women. He sees these as very specific desires that, if you don't keep them in check, can really corrupt your soul and pull you away from God.
This all leads to a really stark contrast he paints between 2 different ways of thinking about money and wealth. On one hand, you have what he calls the Islamic view. The idea there is simple. The best provision is just having enough. Anything extra you have isn't really yours. It's a trust from God that's meant for the poor and the orphaned. And then he puts that right up against what he labels the Jewish and Christian view, which he describes as a millionaire mindset, where the main goal is just to accumulate as much personal wealth as possible.
All right. Now we're getting into a part of the sermon that includes some pretty controversial claims, to say the least. This is where the speaker takes aim at the modern medical system. And he doesn't just critique it, he presents it as something that was deliberately built to be harmful. He starts with this really shocking number, 5 million. He claims that's how many people are killed every single year by modern allopathic medicine. And he cites a book called Death by Medicine, which he notes was written by doctors, to make the case that when people trust the current medical system, they are, in his words, buying death with their own money. So that obviously begs a huge question, right? If the system is really that harmful, how did we get here? Who created it? Well, the sermon offers a very, very specific answer to that.
Okay, so here's the claim laid out in the sermon. He says that about 100 years ago, the Rockefeller family, working with what he calls Zionist forces, came up with a master plan to control the world. And the key to this plan? Getting control over health, over medicine, and over doctors. He alleges that they bought up medical colleges, completely rewrote the curriculum to push their pharmaceutical-based medicine, and then systematically outlawed all other forms of healing, like homeopathy or herbal medicine. And the whole point, according to him, was to create a system that profits from keeping people sick.
So after that really intense critique of the modern world, the sermon completely pivots. It moves into its final section, which is all about solutions. It's a call to action, a detailed plan for how to build a totally different future. And it all starts with education. And the educational model he proposes is, well, it's pretty unique. It's this fascinating blend of deep, traditional religious grounding with some seriously cutting-edge modern skills. So it starts with memorizing the Quran, then becoming fluent in 5 world languages. But right after that, it's about mastering artificial intelligence, learning high-value agriculture, he uses saffron as an example, and getting real-world business and entrepreneurship skills. So what's the goal of all this? What's the end game? Well, the speaker says the whole point is to create a generation that doesn't need jobs because they're the ones creating them. He directly contrasts this with what he calls the Zionist educational model, which he claims is all about teaching business from childhood to create world leaders. His plan is designed to counter that, to build a generation of entrepreneurs who are both spiritually grounded and financially independent. And he wraps it all up with one last, really urgent call to action. He says that in today's world, the single most powerful weapon in this cultural war is the cinematic field, movies and media. He makes this incredible claim that just one powerful film about their history and their beliefs could make millions of people become Shia. So he's urging his followers to jump into filmmaking, to use that medium to win what he sees as the ultimate battle for hearts and minds. It's really a vision of using the most modern tools available to spark a massive spiritual and cultural shift.